questions and one of the things we were discussing is how do you challenge systems of oppression? Because in many ways we participate in these systems even though we're not aware of it. Last year we showed the film The Good Man, done by a local director, Phil Harrison, who will be around, I'm sure, and many of you know. But it was a film that was asking, what does it mean to be good? The film starts with a guy who feels very, very guilty because he comes out of a pub after getting a promotion in his bank, and he nicks somebody else's taxi. This is happening right outside the Merchant, actually. So he jumps into someone else's taxi and drives off. The other guy's giving him the finger, and he's laughing. And then suddenly, the guy who's on the street giving him the finger just gets hit by a car. He's dead. And, this guy's not responsible for the death, but he's somehow implicated in it. And, the story is partly about how he deals with that, or at first how he doesn't deal with that, how he doesn't tell his family, he hides it, he doesn't tell anybody, and how that comes out in destructive ways. His wife starts to think that he's having an affair. She knows something's wrong, but she doesn't know what it is. But then he also starts to support a child in Cape Town, this young guy, because he finds out that the person he killed, or who died, whose taxi he stole, was supporting this child with a monthly donation. So there's partly that story, and then on the other side of the world, the story is about this young man who's growing up in South Africa, and he's trying to work out why the new South Africa looks pretty much like the old South Africa. And the interesting thing about the story is how these two lives, although they're very, very distant, are intertwined. Because the bank that this guy is working for is doing business in Cape Town. And one of the areas of land that has been put aside for housing, social housing, is being bought up by a private company. And so this shanty town, which is going to be people are going to be moved out into housing, this isn't happening. And the story, it's not a simple narrative. It's asking the question, what does it mean to be good? Everybody's trying to be good in the story, but it's not easy. Somebody's supporting another person, but they're potentially participating in a system that is creating problems. And you watch it, and you go, okay, we are all intertwined in what we purchase and in how we live. There's another side to it. So how do we challenge that? And so in order to kind of approach an answer, I want to introduce some terminology from psychoanalysis. Freud, initially, when he started his work early on, he started with kind of this principle that people wanted pleasure principle. And very simply, pleasure is the getting rid of excessive energy and excitation. It's that feeling you get when you're, lying by the beach, or you're, resting after you've done a workout or something like that. It's getting rid of anxiety. It's getting rid of stress. It's that place of just, that we often try to get to through meditation, through yoga, through various means, through going for long walks, whatever it is. And for Freud, he said, well, as organisms, living organisms, this is something that we all desire. We just want to get rid of these tensions that we have. Even sex itself is sometimes what you want is the end. The orgasm is kind of the end of the excitation, and you can kind of relax. And it's like, this is something that is very, very natural for us to want. And then, in relation to the pleasure principle, there is the reality principle. And at first, the reality principle was just the fact that things get in the way of us getting pleasure. From when we're very young, we realize that, we want to watch a certain movie, and our friends don't. And at first, we can be adamant. And I'm actually living with a family at the moment, and they have 2 kids. And I'm seeing this, where the kids are coming into contact with the reality principle, where, they want to play a Nerf battle every night. And I don't want to have a Nerf battle every night. And And at first, it's very, very difficult for them because we're going to have a Nerf battle. This is going to be really fun. But I'm like, really, I can't think of anything worse than, because I'm not allowed to win either. I have to kind of get hit by Nerf things all the time. So that's the reality principle. And so for Freud, originally it was like, okay, this is a very simple thing that provides a certain explanation for life. We want to relax, we want to have fun, we want to find certain peace in our lives, and there are things that get in the way of that, and we have to compromise with other people. But then, as he continued his work, he kind of started to go, well, the reality principle and the pleasure principle are actually more intertwined. It's not just the reality principle is stopping us from getting our pleasure. The idea, and Lacan really brought this out, is the reality principle is maybe required in order for us to have any pleasure. So in order for us to enjoy the down times, we actually need to have something we kind of hit against. And this is why Zizek talks about fairy tales and uses Chesterton to do this. As fairy tales are weird because they give you they give you the happily ever after, they give you something wonderful, but there's always a little condition that's attached. So you can go to the party, you can have everything you want, but you've got to be back by midnight. And it's these weird conditions that are kind of a bit bizarre, and you go, why are the conditions there? And it's the idea that, well, actually, in order to enjoy your life, there's got to be something to compare it to. There's got to be something that's not quite working. So if your work life is going great, often your personal life isn't going great. Or often if your personal life is great, you're kind of going, my work life isn't great. But there's something almost by definition that's not quite right in your life. And you think that that's a bad thing, but that actually is just part of being human. If you finally got everything you wanted, that would just become awful. If you got to just lie by the beach all day, every day, that would very soon become unpleasurable. But then he kind of went further. Later on, he said, well, okay, this doesn't explain everything. Because there's this part of ourselves that has a stubborn attachment to things. We want peace. We want to we have a fantasy of just relaxation and sometimes kind of westernized forms of Buddhism or various kind of practices we do can kind of feed into that. We want that sense of peace. But there's a part of us that connects with a person or a thing, and we almost destroy ourselves or do destroy ourselves to get that thing. And it's not about calmness, it's about excitation. It's something that you think, well, I have to have it. It's excessive, it's exciting, it's in you more than yourself. So whenever you fall in love, it's a form of this. But if there's a product that you think, I really, really need this. If in LA, it feels driven by this. I mean, any city you walk around, but you walk around these shops that are selling desire, not peace. They're selling kind of like, if I could look like that, if I could purchase that, if I could be with that person. It's designed to excite something. And Freud kind of loosely called this the death drive, this excessive drive that like the alien and aliens, it's excessively just going for to kill or to propagate, to kind of reproduce through human beings. It's just this obsessive drive, and no matter what you do to the alien, it just keeps on coming. You can shoot it, until it dies. It's just got this excessive drive for an X. And in many ways, you see this in our culture and consumerism, that it's driven by often this idea that there is something that will make us whole and complete, something wonderful, and that can be oppressive to us. So we have these different options available. One is we try to get away from those things. We try to kind of like find a space in our lives where we stop desiring, we minimize our desire. But the problem is with that often is actually that's exactly what our society needs, because it's exhausting always chasing after things. So having your Tuesday night where you go and do meditation can actually be the very thing that allows you the very next day to get into the frenetic pursuit of objects, of things, of your life. And the whole system kind of runs on our pleasure, on this desire. that we have. So there's something about us living in this society that we get pleasure and desire from, this idea that this object, this brand new car, this person, whatever it is, that will make me happy. And the problem is it's fool's gold. You're in Ireland, one of the mythologies of Ireland. Well, this is what I was told when I was growing up. I don't know if it's true, but that leprechauns are always looking for gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So anytime I was driving around Belfast, if there were roadworks, my parents would say, they're searching for gold. It's the leprechauns searching for gold. And then they would say, it was only a few years ago that I realized that's not true. And then the idea was, but it's fool's gold. It's stupid. They're going to find fool's. So I would kind of like shout out, it's fool's gold. It's fool's gold. You're doing all this work. It's just fool's gold. But that's kind of like how we all are. That when you get the thing, the X that you seem to be driven to get, it doesn't give you what you want. And this is stuff you've obviously heard me talk about before, this obsessive drive. But our system works in a way on that drive to get something, because when we don't get it, often then we go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and we're participating in the system. Now, the issue is not that that's necessarily a problem. The idea is potentially that, the death drive is just in us. That's us. That's who we are. That's part of being human. It's not something to try and... You can try and get rid of it. You can try to take yourself out. But even the desire to take yourself out is kind of like a desire to get the thing that will make you whole and complete. The desire to not desire anymore is itself, caught up in this thing. So what's the alternative? Well, in a sense, it's realizing that where the pleasure is not in getting the thing, but the pleasure is in the pursuit and in the sacrifice and in the work and in the back and forth. That's kind of like, so if you meet someone who is incredibly successful in their field and they get the platinum album, or they get whatever it is they're going for, the Nobel Peace Prize, what are the stories that are going to tell? It's the stories of how they got there, and the stories of the struggles and the sacrifices, not the getting there itself. It's like in sports, the guy who's living with me at the moment, Trip Fuller, some of you will know, he watches sports at night, and like I can't get a handle on it at all. Sports make no sense to me whatsoever, because I'm watching this two people kicking a ball around, trying to get the ball from that end to that end, and it just looks completely ridiculous. And then nobody wins. I mean, people win in the short term, but nobody wins football. Nobody wins it. It's like, and then it's just the next game and the next game and then another big thing, and it's not like... And then next year, it's going to be a massive thing, and then someone will actually win the football, right? It's just never ending. What's going on? And then they, start another sport or something. But then when I talk to him about it, I realize that he starts to tell me about the people who are playing and the kind of the background, and that player came up in this school, and we used to play for this team, and had and I realized that the pleasure of the game isn't kind of in the winning, it's in the entire struggle of the team and what they've gone through. And in fact, if you have a team that wins all the time and doesn't struggle at all, it would become incredibly boring. That of course there's a little bit of pleasure in the win, but the pleasure partly comes from the sacrifices and all of that. So the idea for me is, how do we, because religion then works in a similar way. There's religious promises that say you can get rid of your desire, you can pull away from the world and kind of find some sort of like kind of peace, perfect peace. And there's an element of that which is wonderful and true, but I think that it's a type of fiction, because we'll always have this death drive to some extent. There's that dream. There's also in religion sometimes the promise of fullness and wholeness, and if you only get God, if you only come to the front, and everything will be wonderful. If you only pray enough or fast enough or read the Bible enough, whatever it is, then everything will be great. And the problem with that is, if if you do the thing, like I was that person who went up to the front, and I walked up in this church and gave my life to Jesus, and I was kind of expecting that to be, that's it, I've done it, I've passed the finishing line. Well, my life will be brilliant, and of course, for a while it was. There's an elation to that, but then when it starts to crumble, then we have to supplement. Oh, well, you should read this, you should go to this conference. And then I'm continually trying to supplement the happiness that I supposedly have. Something's not quite working, It's like a product. And you get the product, and then you have to get the upgrades, and because it doesn't work. There's never going to be the iPhone, It's the iPhone Infinity, and it just is the thing. I mean, the iPhone is as close to perfection as you can get. But, so you supplement, or you start to find people to blame, scapegoating. The reason why this isn't working is because of them, the other, those liberals or atheists or fundamentalists, and you find someone to blame for why things aren't quite working out. But the challenge, I think, for us is to create communities where we find pleasure in the struggles and in the losses as much as the wins, that we're not striving to find the thing that will make this right, but we find a way of enjoying what it means to be in conflict with each other, to be struggling with each other, to all of the things that in sense we think, if only we could get past that, it would be great. So this morning when I was talking about us as a community together, hopefully having the grace to look out for ourselves and each other in this time, that doesn't lead to a healthy community. If we do that, it doesn't lead to some healthy endpoint. That is healthy community. If we're able to, have our arguments and offer forgiveness to each other, that won't end up somewhere good. That is the good place itself. We're in it. We're in that space. And it's very difficult to do. Just last week I was at a party and I did the Irish goodbye. I don't know if you know what the Irish goodbye is. We just leave, right? You'll see it a bit here. Someone's the life and soul of the party, and then you look around and they're just gone. And so I did the Irish goodbye, and I felt really bad because I'd gone with my friends, and I just disappeared. And it wasn't the right thing to do at all. They were there. I should have been looking out for them, whatever. And so what I did is I just forgot about it. I just was like, instead of apologizing, I just kind of like, oh, forget it. I didn't have the ability to say sorry. But one of them contacted me and said, "Oh, are you okay?" And then I was able to go, like, I feel really bad. I shouldn't have done that. But yes, that's the courage to be able to say sorry to each other and to look out for each other. So very briefly, this little TED talk of mine is to say that all of the stuff that you've heard me communicate and in my books and about, this X that we want to grab that will make us whole and complete. For me, we just misunderstand where the pleasure is. And a healthy community, like in a healthy love relationship, you see the other not as going to fulfill you, not as the end that will make everything great. You see a good, healthy relationship as struggling together, fighting together, making up together, that this place of lack and struggle and no final solution, an ongoing thing, this lack of a final big, wow, this is it. If we're able to embrace that, then we're able to, I think, detach from the very thing that generates our society in its worst possible ways. Because it feeds off our pleasure. If we can create and get our pleasure from something else, then we won't feed the system. It's probably the biggest political act you can do is remove your pleasure from the system. Just last night I was talking to William Crawley, and I'll end with this, but he was talking about a little church in a place called the Lincoln Center. Where was that, in New York City? Yeah, I think it was New York City. But he was saying, they were building this massive office block, and of course this is New York City. They were just paying off everybody to build this block, and there was one little church. It was like, no. And then they offered more, no, more, And basically, I mean, it's New York City. They're basically giving them a blank check. Whatever you want. And this little community was just like, no, no. And it's madness to me. And it's madness to most of us who go like, well, it gets a point when they're offering the right amount of money. It was like, Einstein said about, everyone's a prostitute, it's just the amount of money, right? And that was the system. It's like, everybody, it's like, I think the story goes, was it Marilyn Monroe? Somebody said, this is completely false, actually making this up, but I think it was somebody said to Marilyn Monroe, like, would you sleep with me? And she was like, no. And she's like, then he offered her money, and she said, like, what? I'm not a prostitute. And then supposedly Einstein or whatever said, well, it's just he hasn't offered you the right amount of money, right? But that's not the case for this little church. There was no right amount of money. It wasn't just like, we're in the system. It's just you haven't found our buying point. It's like we don't get our pleasure from that. We are a little community doing our thing, trying to struggle together. There's no amount of money you can offer because it's just that's not where we get our pleasure. And you see this even in Venice Beach, a little house that could be sold for so much money, and somebody's in there just going, no, I'm not selling out. I just like surfing every day, and I've made peace with myself. That's radical, where in some ways we're able to genuinely unplug, not secretly desire it, secretly be dragged in by it. We may have a lot, we may have a little, but where we're not controlled by it. Where somehow we are unplugged from obviously the analogy in the Matrix, human beings are batteries that feed the system. And Zizek says, well, this film, it's kind of true, but the system is fed by our desire. That's how the system feeds. We're plugged in, and the energy because Zizek said, well, the artificial intelligence doesn't need humans as batteries. I mean, that's ridiculous. They could find much better ways. What if the system feeds not on our energy, it feeds on our jouissance, our desire, our pleasure? And what if we can create little communities where we are unplugged from that, and where we genuinely find fulfillment in the midst of this, in the midst of our lives?